I am a cult scholar and cult survivor of one of the world's most extreme cults, the Children of God. And I'm going to tell you how the cult 45, cult of MAGA, happened and Donald Trump being president as its biggest manifestation. All right, I'm going to use my little list here. Okay, so this goes back to the Reagan era, right? And Reagan did one significant thing, which was remove the truth in journalism standards. And this is when Rupert Murdoch starts Fox News, amongst many other things, right? As entertainment. It doesn't have to be news anymore. What is the first thing a wannabe dictator or cult leader does? Makes you distrust the media. Okay. So the evangelical leadership at this time, they get together to decide on their worldview and transcendent mission. Yes, just like any of these business conferences you have been to where the C-suite gets together and decides. And they decided they were going to pick two things, right? Their transcendent mission, you have to tie it to life and death if you really want to get people culted, right? That was going to be save the babies, right? And then you need an other, you need an outsider, you need a threat. And they decided that that was going to be hating members of the LGBTQ community. That'll bond us, okay? This is sort of your worldview, of course, Christian nationalism, right? This is what we are going for. And the sacred assumption, we are right, right? And this all comes about, why? Why? Oh, because white Christian America is scared that patriarchy is coming down and white supremacy is coming down, and America doesn't feel to them like a white nation anymore. Okay, so you're getting your worldview, you're getting your mission. Mission is save the babies, but don't forget to hate people. And save the babies is so important that it requires any level of self-sacrifice. And this is really important because in order to break cult members down, you have to get them to sacrifice their personal identity. Okay? So the mission has to be really good, often after some space travel. And you've got to get them willing to sacrifice their identity. It happens in many different ways. They don't know that they're doing that, but they're doing that. Right? The years move on. The isolation and insulation from the world is increasing because now more and more and more we're only listening to Fox News, which of course Donald Trump has ramped up by only since 2016 by training his people that they will only hear from him on Fox News. He also has just one way to message all of his people, right? A good cult leader is always going to have that. They are all listening to the things he says, and he knows how to keep himself on television all of the time. The leader puts the photos of them everywhere and starts having every word they say recorded. This is another part of programming people. There's a reason we're not used to hearing from American presidents all of the time, and when we are, it is jarring. It should be. Okay, so now we have the isolation. We are getting more and more polarized in the US all of the time, presented these black and white choices, and politics has never been more polarized. They start having their own internalized language. This is when we see terms like reverse racism and white genocide coming straight out of Christian nationalism and the alt-white into mainstream red America. Right, really their own language, their own facts, and the isolation growing more and more extreme. Of course, we have COVID. Isolation does what isolation does, and isolation ramps up extremism. And isolation makes it more important to us. We inherently know when we're isolated in a group away from the world, we know that we need to fit in order to survive. That's why total institutions are always risky places, and places where group norms matter a lot, and everyone needs to act more and more similar. Appearance control starts coming up, right? And appearance control is always about behavior control. Think about Christian purity culture that spread like wildfire in the 90s, right? And then you have the us versus them mentality, which, as we said, we picked a group of people and we are going to make them our issue. Whether they are or not. Okay, so you got that. You've got this us versus them mentality. And of course, you have the evil other side that is unaliving the babies, right? Helping you with your mission. Your us versus them is solid, and so is your persecution complex. And research shows that the perception of persecution is enough to make people commit acts of violence on behalf of their in-group as actual oppression is. So yeah, the whole like angry white men thing going on, like that's part of what happened. They perceive they are persecuted, and you know what? They're right. Patriarchy is coming down. You're not just going to get handed stuff on a silver platter because you're a white man anymore. Like, it's coming down. The cracks are there. I'll give a tiny bit of good news at the end. Us versus them mentality. Then you get to step 8, which is the most significant, and it ties to the self-sacrifice, because we've already taught you you're not an individual, and we did that. Why? So that you'll live in an almost dissociated state and let us take your labor. Think about all those church ladies with their smiles for the babies and the dead eyes, right? And all of the children's labor that is sacrificed in pursuit of this all-consuming mission. Oh, and did I mention cults are always out for political power? Yeah, cults are always out for political power. And in today's America, they are getting it. You know, because now we are on high exit and entrance costs. Trump has made it very, very clear that if you are not 100% loyal, your everything is over, right? People are legitimately concerned for Liz Cheney and others that he might take revenge on, right? The exit costs of not supporting the cult are high. The entrance costs are high. Most people have lost members of their family to Cult 45. This is one of the most common entrance costs that we pay, burning bridges with family and friends. It also sometimes keeps us from being able to leave the cult. And finally, ends justifies the means mentality, right? We will do anything. We will justify anything, including elected a rapist, convicted felon who has already tried to overthrow democracy and has told us that he wants to be a dictator. Oh, and by the way, a country under a totalitarian leadership is a type of cult. I did mention a tiny bit of good news, so I'll end there. The way that cults end is when they fail to keep or recruit the next generation. We saw that happen with the Children of God. I lived through that happening. You can get copies of Uncultured signed here, by the way, about growing up in the Children of God cult and then going into the cult of the U.S. Army. And the way that cults fail to end is they fail to keep or recruit the next generation. And you know what? All U.S. Army is failing to recruit this generation now. And Trump's appointing someone who doesn't think women should be in combat, an argument we already solved. So he's going to make his own military weaker. The only age demographic that Trump carried was boomers and higher. And while there's not a lot of silver lining about Shady Vance, it will be the first time a millennial is in the White House. So, like, we're going to have some dark times, and we are going to be tested, and we, especially white women, are probably going to have to get uncomfortable and actually make some sacrifices. But I do believe overall, like, the cult is not going to win. The cult is already, we're living through the largest exodus of religion. Utah had 5% more Democratic voters. That's how many ex-Mormons there are now. So, you know, all the money in the world, all the power in the world. You can't keep the children. Your cult dies off eventually.